Thank you to our audience for joining. Probably we'll just get started with introductions before I actually, just to get started, just because it's going to be recording and I'm going to publish it tomorrow. And then this will be a reminder for everyone to come to our careers night tomorrow night, or when people are listening to it tomorrow, it's tonight. It's going to be really great. We're going to have breakout rooms with all the different companies that are participating, so you can ask professionals in the field questions and they'll be able to answer you live on the spot. And there will also be a panel, but the breakout room should be pretty interesting, just to get live answers from real live professionals in the cosmetics industry. Just to get started for this conversation, I'll just let each of you introduce yourselves. And Cassandra, would you like to go first this time?
Sure. My name is Cassandra Celestin. I am the beauty chemist. I am a cosmetic chemist and a licensed cosmetologist, makeup artist, and a trichologist. I've been in this industry for over 15 years, and I'm a complete chemist. I formulate hair, skincare, color cosmetic, and hair color.
Lolita, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lolita. Good to see everyone again this week. I'm also a cosmetic chemist. I focus mostly on skincare. And yeah.
Esther, would you like to go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Esther Olu. I'm also a cosmetic chemist amongst everybody speaking today. I specifically specialize in skincare and hair care. I'm currently working in the contract manufacturing sector right now. I also do some science communication with Jen and Lolita and Perry on Instagram at the Melanin Chemist as well.
Perry, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Perry Romanowski. I've been a cosmetic chemist, almost 30 years. I worked on brands like Tresemme, VO5, Nexus, St. Ives, and so these are the kinds of products that end up in people's stores. So that's kind of cool. Lately, I've been working on a podcast called The Beauty Brains, where we answer beauty questions from the standpoint of cosmetic chemists. And I also have a website that teaches people how to make cosmetics or become cosmetic chemists. And it's usually aimed mostly at people in college to bridge the gap between college and coming into the industry. It's called Chemist Corner, so you can check that out.
And then last but not least, Cynthia.
Hey everybody, my name is Cynthia Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Cindy J Cosmetic Labs, LLC. I'm also a cosmetic chemist. I've been in the cosmetic science industry for 6 years, and my main focus is hair care and skincare. I'm here to help startup brands, indie beauty brands, small businesses create their own custom formulation.
And so this week's chat is titled Props to Esther for this title, The Double Edge in Beauty. So essentially, we're going to be talking about some of the kind of sketchy stuff going on in the beauty space with respect to manufacturing, testing, SPF claims. There's a lot of noise around that as of late. Supplier data, recalls, and marketing. And just because this is a topic that maybe is on a lot of people's minds right now, to SPF, maybe we could start there and start with a question. What is SPF? And then also, how is it tested? And I'll make this kind of big so then everyone can chime in wherever they want for this question. How is SPF tested around the world? Does anyone want to dive into this question first? Maybe Perry, because you just wrote a blog about it.
No, I'll dive in. Sure. It's the way sunscreens are done. SPF is sun protection factor, and one thing that you should know as a formulator, and I have to apologize. I just assume everybody in the audience is a formulator or they want to be a formulator. So I'm going to pretend that's true. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to pretend that. So if you're a formulator, there are two types of products, at least when you're formulating in the United States, two types of products you're going to work on, cosmetics and then over-the-counter drugs. A sunscreen in the United States is an over-the-counter drug. And what that just means is that the FDA has a thing called a monograph, which gives you ingredients that you're allowed to use and claims that you're allowed to make. And anybody who wants to make a sunscreen has to use those ingredients and make those claims. So the FDA also dictates the testing that you have to follow to verify that an SPF number is what it is. Essentially, what you do is it's a clinical test where you use real people. You measure how long it takes their skin to burn, and then that's without anything on. And then you measure how long it takes their skin to burn when you put your sunscreen on. And from that, you can get an SPF value. I'll let somebody else add now if you want to.
Does anyone else want to add anything? Maybe around the different tests out there, and is there variation around the world? So right now, I guess the reason why I brought this up is it turns out that there are, and I mean, this isn't really a big surprise because this has been happening on the market, kind of discrepancies for SPF for what's labeled for a while. So what this is a surprise to some people, I guess, as of late, because some of the indie brands out there we're finding out now that the SPF labeled isn't right. So why are there these discrepancies? Could it be due to the way that SPF testing is done? And maybe we can dive more into like how exactly it's done, why there might be some variation here, or do you think that variation might be seen from somewhere else? Anyone want to chime in? Yeah.
I'll just chime in. The IFSCC, and I'd encourage you to go to the IFSCC website, and you can see we did a webinar in December, which looked specifically at UV testing and why there are discrepancies. But essentially, and there's a standard put out by ISO, and so it's ISO 24444 and then ISO 24442. One of those is for just UVB measuring, so that's SPF, and another one has UVA involved. So they're two different kinds of tests. But in that webinar, the expert, John Stanton, he told about experiments where they took the same formula, same sunscreen formula, and sent it to different labs, and they got vastly different results. And it turns out the testing for SPF, even though there's a specific ISO standard and FDA has a standard, there's a huge amount of variation that goes on between labs. And so I saw one paper where the SPF of the same thing was measured to be a 60, and it was measured to be a SPF of 5. Now, this is the same formula, and the only difference was the two labs and how they do the testing. So there are certainly some standards on how to do it, but it shouldn't become a surprise to any of us that one lab will get a different result than another lab because the testing is just that inconsistent. And another issue is that from batch to batch changes, the way that a sunscreen is put together, that can also lead to differences. So I think one of the things that's happening when these people, a brand will run their sunscreen test, they'll get their value, and they're not going to keep running it to make sure that they get the same value all the time or get a like an average value, and then they'll have the standard deviation. One thing you should know is that claims testing in the cosmetic industry is not really science. Claims is to support what you want to say, and it's illegal in the industry to lie. So what you do need to do is have tests that demonstrate that what you're saying is not a lie. Now, if you have a test and it says it's SPF 50, then you run that one time and you say, okay, then we're SPF 50. But if somebody else ran it a different batch of years and they got SPF 25, that doesn't surprise me. And it doesn't mean the company's lying. It just demonstrates that there's a huge variation in what results you're going to get from type of testing. Just if I could leave you with anything, claims testing in cosmetics is not science.
I also wanted to add, great points, Perry. I also wanted to add that these tests are not cheap. So, I mean, it can be like 5,000 to 10,000 or even more sometimes. Especially when you're, I guess the tests are required to be putting 2 milligrams per square centimeter of sunscreen, on a back of human volunteers. And then you have to like shine this UV lamp on their backs and, figure out how much UV the skin can take, with and without the sunscreen. And so, and you have to keep repeating this, I guess, until you have a consistent answer. And, that's expensive. And so that's another issue where, I don't know, like there's, brands or labs that maybe just do it once or twice, and then you send it out to a third party and well, they get some other answer because maybe they did it like 3, 4, 5 times. So cost can also play a role in some of these discrepancies.
I also wanted to add, like a specific example, like what happened last year with Perito, Inky Decoder. I believe they sent the sunscreen to 2 different labs, and if I'm not mistaken, there was 2 different SPF readings. And then when Perito tested it, they also had a completely different reading from the what was tested by Inky Decoder. So I'm going back to what Perry and Lolita are saying. There's like a lot of variability with when it comes to testing, especially with SPF.
Also,
I would want to add. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say also with that, what Esther mentioned, they were way under SPF 50. That was like a big jump. I think it was like 18.4 or something with one test, and the other one was around 24 point something.
Yeah, that is what I recall seeing too. But to this idea of the variability of testing, to all the new formulators out there or wannabes, that is one of the biggest issues in the cosmetic industry. When you look at any kind of testing that is done, it's not done to figure out what is scientifically accurate or what is absolutely true. Most of the testing that's done in the industry is to support a claim that your brand wants to make. And so if you ran a test, sunscreen is getting a lot of attention because it's just in the news. But if you looked at any cosmetic claim that people are making and you really had to rerun all the tests that they had independently, there would be a lot of claims that don't stand up to multiple iterations of testing. I'm thinking of like Fructis has that claim where it makes your hair 10 times stronger. It doesn't make your hair 10 times stronger. They did a test where they could show that, but if you took a Instron machine or a Diastron and you pulled the force in that, it would not be 10 times stronger. So just remember that when you're seeing claims and the types of testing that's done in the cosmetic industry, it's not designed to find out what's absolutely true. It's designed to support what the company wants to say.
Just so everyone knows in the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists directly, like Bijou, I don't know how to say that name, and I also don't know if that is your name. So correct me, please. But like what was just done, you just have to raise your hand with the hand button at the bottom of the screen, and then I will be able to invite you to the stage, and then you can ask your question. But would you like to ask your question or make your comment?
Hi. Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me correctly?
I can hear you great.
Okay, very good. Actually, it's not so much of a question, is that I was actually just looking at some information on the FDA's website, and they answer a question about what the requirements for applying sunscreens to test SPF are. And one thing that I noticed is that the procedure is basically grab a finger cut, grab some sunscreen, and smear it on the volunteer. And this, to me, I see this having a problem. So I'm a color, I do color cosmetics, I make lipsticks. I work with pigment dispersions every day, and I make my own. And as probably other color cosmetics have experienced, if you just like get some dispersion on your finger and do a smear on the surface, you're going to get a very uneven layer distribution. Like if you do a drawdown, you're supposed to use tools that guarantee a specific layer thickness. And I can see this being a real issue, because what if someone is a little bit more heavy-handed? What if someone applies a bit less pressure and gets a thicker layer? And furthermore, because the SPF is also based on time for skin redness, different humans react differently, right? Like I'm Portuguese, I have a different reaction to UV that someone who is Irish is, even though we may have ostensibly the same skin color. So I think that there is some weaknesses in the testing procedure itself that may result in different labs reporting vastly different results, aside from the conflicts of interest that Perry also mentioned.
You bring up a very. Oh, sorry, Cassandra, go ahead. Sorry, no, go ahead. You can go ahead.
I was gonna say you bring up a good point about that, because I'm black, so my natural SPF is not going to be like 4. It's going to be, I think they usually say like 10 to 13 or something. And also with what's the pool size, and what are the people that they're testing the SPF on? Are they on medication? Because I know that can also make you sensitive to UV exposure. So that's an excellent point that you brought up. I mean, globally, you have, with Korea, Japan, EU, India, and United States all, do things differently when it comes to, their safety and drug testing. So are these companies that are selling overseas somewhere, are they testing for different skin types as well? That's something that should be brought up.
You both make great points. I was literally just about to say that, Cassandra. So great minds think alike. This also brings to mind the Fitzpatrick scale. I know it's like the widely accepted classification system, but we know that there's a lot of drawbacks with that system. So I just want to add how that, since that is pretty much like the foundation of what a lot of people use to make some classifications. There's definitely a lot of variability when it comes to different skin types, and that can also heavily impact the values that comes through when we do SPF testing.
If it's okay for me to say something else, because I don't want to take over the show.
Yeah, feel free to say something.
I remember on Perry's website, at Chemists Corner on the forums, I remember years ago reading a thread, and there was a comment there from someone that kind of stuck with me, which was exactly on this topic, which was about how a brand, a very popular brand that you can find in pharmacies all over the United States, could be that their SPF claim is a little bit suspect, because the formulation also contained ingredients that are known for reducing redness. So let's say that you have in your formulation a lot of ingredients that are soothing for the skin and reduce redness and all that, and it's great. The consumers who are going to use the formula are probably going to enjoy it greatly. But the fact that the redness is reduced and maybe takes longer to show up makes no difference to the amount of damage that is being done to your skin via ultraviolet, right? I mean, it's like it's the damage is already done. The redness is a reaction to that damage, but the fact that the redness is being disguised, as it were, doesn't mean the damage didn't happen. So this is another weakness I feel in how the FDA tests for SPF.
I would maybe just chime in and say that like right now there's no perfect SPF testing, and as Perry with the I believe this was in the webinar that you had highlighted from the IFSCC. Is it IFSCS or IFSCC? That
IFSCC, yeah.
Okay. IFSCC highlighted the need to eventually like move away from the in vivo testing that we are currently doing, and maybe the ethics around it, or maybe that was a different webinar from the IFSCC. You guys have done quite a few on sunscreens, but for SCC members, then probably go check out those webinars. I'll also just say on this front, I had Marcel Schneider on my podcast from BASF. He is their sun care technical advisor or leader. I'm not exactly sure his title, but he runs the sun care department, I guess, at BASF. And he is going to be on our podcast next week, where we dove into this topic in a whole bunch more detail. But yeah, I guess I'll leave my thoughts there. Does anyone else want to chime in before we maybe move off of SPF claims? I'm sure we're missing a whole bunch to this conversation.
I think that it's just important to reiterate what Perry was saying earlier, is that some of these brands are not intentionally lying when it comes to testing. I mean, some may be lying, like who knows, but some really just it just brings up complications, especially when some brands do outsource their testing to third-party manufacturers. And just going back to the fact that there's going to be variability. Doesn't mean that a brand is necessarily lying. There's just a lot of complications, and also that we have like a very long way to go when it comes to improving SPF testing.
Well said.
And for brands, I guess, wanting to launch a product, I know this is a really expensive ask, but doing SPF testing with multiple labs. So I guess for me, and I would be interested in your thoughts here on the panel on this. I like to purchase from indie brands for a lot of different products, but sunscreen is something that just because the formulation aspect is super challenging, but then also the testing, you have to have the resources to do sufficient testing to substantiate these claims, which are shady to begin with. I personally prefer purchasing sunscreen products just because of all of this from larger brands, and I'll purchase from smaller brands for other products, but that's my stance. Do you guys agree with me or disagree? What do you guys think on that?
I personally agree. I think SPF is it's like very important. Nobody wants to get skin cancer, of course. And we've definitely noticed from time to time that a lot of indie brands or upcoming brands, they dodge a lot of tests that they should be doing. Stability testing, preservative efficacy testing, SPF testing, for example. They might not intentionally be doing it, or some may be intentionally doing it, but it's really not worth the risk, especially when your health is at stake here. So I completely agree that purchasing from like larger brands, like multinationals, for example, like let's say like Unilever's daughter companies or L'Oreal, et cetera, is a little bit more trustworthy because they clearly have the money to pay for multiple testing.
I agree with Esther too. Definitely will want to look into the bigger brands when it comes to SPF. I personally have been lacking SPF in my skincare routine, and I'm actually looking for a brand for SPF. And I know my initial thought, especially with everything going on, to definitely look into the bigger brands for SPF products.
Yeah, I agree with
I,
everyone. Oops,
yeah,
sorry.
I was gonna say I agree with that one as well. I, when I worked for a contract manufacturer and the clients were like a huge brand, um, one was even a sun care brand, but it wasn't a sun care product. But however, they were very meticulous with their stability testing and their packaging compatibility testing. I mean, very, very rigorous with that. And they did more than the average brands out there. So yeah, I would definitely say that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think some of the brands that have been around the longest that have been making sunscreens are super reliable. You can't really go wrong. So I definitely say sunscreens from the larger brands as well.
So I guess I'll ask my next question unless Perry, you want to chime in on this or the last question.
No, I agree with the assessment there. I generally think that the advice that I give consumers is if you want the safest products, you buy it from the big companies. Uh, that's I don't want to be a shill for big companies, but they have an incentive to make sure that their products are safe, make sure that they work for the most number of people, because if something goes wrong, you can sue them and they will have to pay money. Whereas with a small company, if something goes wrong or they've broken some rule, um, often what'll happen is they'll just go bankrupt, and then you suing them, it doesn't do you any good, and they can just start another company. And this doesn't happen as much in the cosmetic industry. Our products fortunately don't hurt people that much, but in the health food supplement industry, this happens all the time. And so that's the advice I give to consumers. But that doesn't mean that small brands and indie brands can't make good products. They certainly can. And if you're working for one of those or you started one yourself, what you're going to have to do is build a direct relationship with your customers one at a time, build up some trust there, and of course, do all the testing and make sure everything's right. It costs a little bit more money to launch products than people probably realize. But yeah, overall, especially for sunscreens, that as a health product, I'd encourage people to stick with the big guys.
Now, Perry, you had mentioned this before that claims testing isn't so much of a science. And I think that people might be surprised about that. And maybe just focusing this question to ingredient supplier data, because you can find some pretty bold claims, especially because they can make claims that wouldn't be allowed on cosmetics for ingredients. You can find some pretty bold claims for ingredient suppliers from ingredient suppliers. I would imagine that it would be, especially if you don't have the right consultant, if you're an indie brand, pretty challenging to sift through ingredient supplier data to find ingredients that may be effective for your products. And something else that I sometimes find, especially with indie brands, is they make the claims that are from their ingredient supplier and they haven't actually substantiated it with their finished product to make sure that that's actually happening, but also a lot of fluff around the substantiation. Do you guys want to chime in on this topic, on your thoughts around the quality of data for ingredient suppliers or ingredients on the market, and maybe suggestions for sifting through the data to find ingredients that may work, but also bold claims? Are these ingredients actually going to do that much? For example, are they going to have a Botox-like effect or whatever other bold claim that you'll see associated with cosmetic ingredients? Lolita, would you like to go first? Oh, Cynthia, you have your hand. Cynthia, would you like to go first?
No, you're fine. You're fine. And we literally just talked about this the other day regarding suppliers. I mean, the information, like you said, it's bold. It seems great, but what is the target market? And I know ethnic skin is huge right now as far as needing more information. We noticed that a lot of suppliers do not target ethnic skin. They don't target that type of testing on ethnic skin or people of color. So, how true is this ingredient going to be in my product if my target market is people of color or ethnic skin? I think that's a big question that I have as well as a chemist.
I think, to chime in on this too, I would say that bigger suppliers, like raw material suppliers, for example, Sederma that manufactures Matrixyl 3000, I would say that, I mean, they're looking at their studies. They do have some good, they've done some clinical studies and it looks like their data is pretty solid. I mean, they've been around for quite a long time. To me, I mean, I personally think that I believe they're owned by Croda. Croda has a lot of has been around for a long time. It's a fairly big company, and they've done a lot of different studies on their raw materials. So I would say, like, if you were to, like, if I were to go with, let's say, Matrixyl from Sederma, I wouldn't entirely like see an issue with that because I believe some of their clinical studies are pretty effective. But then again, when it comes to formulating it in your final product, what is the effect going to be on your skin? That is dependent on the formulation, consumer skin type, all of that. But I would say some of the larger raw material suppliers, I would be okay with, looking at their data and using their data to make a determination on, if I want to use them or not.
I agree. I feel like a way to kind of vet some brands is actually testing the raw materials. For example, a contract manufacturer that I'm working with, they want to change out some of their colors that would be oil soluble. So we're just testing colors and some base just to see if any of them would change color within the stability parameters, like 40 degrees C, 50 degrees C, et cetera, et cetera. And some suppliers will be like, yeah, it's fine. It'll be fine, through stability. But when with my experience, some of these colors did not even last under 1 month stability. So it's kind of important not to take everything that suppliers are saying as truth. These are things that you kind of have to take with a grain of salt and do some testing if you have the means to do it. And also, this is kind of like where I see a problem with some brands using the clinical data of suppliers rather than doing clinical testing. I know it's very expensive, so I completely understand why some brands do it, but it becomes a very gray area when brands use the clinical testing of suppliers, and because some of these suppliers might not be completely reliable. For example, Lolita was mentioning bigger suppliers, and then there's smaller suppliers coming up with like new materials, and not everything is completely reliable. So it's a very gray area.
And Cindy J knows this, but when suppliers used to come to the contract manufacturer we worked, I used to really drill them about their their dossier.
Yes, all the time.
Data. And a lot of time they couldn't answer the questions. So those were the ones that I was always suspicious of. And they would say, we'll get you more information. And when they did email it, it wasn't enough for me. But the ones that were very confident and competent in the industry that they worked in with the supplier, then, we would build relationships with them and actually trust them. And, we're like, okay, this product is really good because, we have the information, and then we make the product. And even though we're not doing our own kind of claims testing or clinical testing, as far as like aesthetics with like hair or skin, you can tell if, the skin feels better, or if it, radiates more glow, if the hair has more conditioning or detangling properties. So I usually just really drill them and get them to give me as much information about the raw material, and that's how I kind of vet them.
I think one of the things to keep in mind, at the end of the day, suppliers, they want to sell you something. And so whenever you're in a situation where somebody is giving you information and they're trying to get you to buy something, you have to be very skeptical. Now, as a consumer, you have to be skeptical of what brands are saying about their products. But as a chemist, these raw material suppliers, theoretically, they should have a much more difficult time selling to chemists because chemists, we should be trained not to fall for marketing speak. But we do. We want to invent new products that really work great, and we see data and we think it's great. I see one of the ingredients that I see all the time that's used in hair care products is panthenol. Very popular ingredient. A lot of suppliers have a lot of data about that. But I got to be honest with you, in the times I've used panthenol in formulating, and I've tried it at lots of different levels to see if there's anything to it, I've never been able to demonstrate that it does anything. Now, you have to put it in there because consumers love it and consumers believe it does something. But if you do it in a sort of a scientifically controlled study with trusses, I see very little to no benefit of having extra panthenol in there. And suppliers are not going to, like the supplier panthenol, they're not going to show you that study where they did it and they showed no difference. They're only going to show you studies where it's highlighting their ingredient and it's showing some great benefit. And one of the things that you should do when you're evaluating the data that you get from suppliers is look at it, what was the control they compared it to? Now, normally they're going to pick a control that shows that the ingredient does something, okay? And usually that control is either no treatment, and or it's going to be some treatment that's not that good anyway. What you as the chemist want to do is to find out that you want them to test it against the best treatment out there. So if it's a hair conditioning ingredient, for example, you want to see what does this ingredient do compared to dimethicone or a cationic surfactant. You don't want to just compare it to with and without that ingredient. And so those are the kinds of things that you have to look for. And I encourage all formulators to just be a bit skeptical about the data that they get. And I agree, Jen, there are a lot of companies that'll just use supplier data to support their claims. That is a risk that you're taking. If somebody sued you, for example, this is the responsibility of claim support falls on the brand, the person who's selling the product. You can't just point to the supplier and say, well, this is my support data. That's not going to be good enough in a court of law. Now, if you never get sued, you never get called out on it, well, you skated by, you lucked out. But if you don't feel good just relying on luck, then you've got to do the supporting data.
Yeah, and I'm always very skeptical of ingredients that are saying, oh, we have strong evidence that it's going to cause X, but then I go and look at the public peer review data out there, and there's not that much evidence out there, little to none. Now, I have had many conversations where people have disagreed with me about what I am looking for ingredients to put together a product for. I don't know, maybe something that's like brightening. I might gravitate towards something that has more peer-reviewed data out there. Or maybe as a consumer, if I'm looking for a product that I feel confident that might work, I would prefer to use products with ingredients that have peer-reviewed data out there. Supplier data isn't like peer reviewed. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And so I always just feel kind of like squeamish about the quality of the data and especially if it hasn't been replicated. I guess the thing with Matrixol that is really great from Sederma is their ingredients have been substantiated from independent sources and the results have been replicated. But that's quite unique for at least for peptides. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I would agree. That definitely is having peer-reviewed data or evidence is certainly better than not. I'm probably a little bit too cynical because
Yes.
wait, I try not to be cynical, but I've just seen a lot, and one of the things that makes me a little bit, it makes me come off as a little bit cynical, or I disbelieve stuff, is that I know how bad consumers are at noticing differences. I once made a shampoo where I tested this thing, and I could tell it was great. It was like combing was great, the feel was great, and I spent a lot of time on it. And I took that formula and I made it look and smell exactly like just our standard VO5 formula, the 99-cent formula shampoo. Now, visually and the way you smell it, you couldn't really tell a difference. But when I used it, I could tell that the foam was creamier, it rinsed better, it left my hair better, it left the hair on the tresses better. Well, I gave it to a panel of 15 consumers, although they were people in the lab, so they also had some lab chops to them. And of the 15 people, all I said was, can you tell any differences here? And of the 15 people I tested, only one person could sell any difference. They thought it was the same product. So I had that experience, and I had the experience of seeing products that you send out for a home use test. We would send out the same formula in a home use test, a shampoo conditioner test. You test it with 100 consumers. They get to use it for 2 weeks, and then they do questionnaires. And we would do the same formula, but we just changed the fragrance. And the results you get back, you look at the foaming is vastly different. Even though I know it's exactly the same formula, the fragrance is different, and there was not a significant difference in foam. There certainly wasn't a significant difference in viscosity, and yet consumers decided, or they reported, that there was this big differences. And so I sort of have lost faith in what consumers can really tell when it comes to differences. And when you're looking at ingredients, and even in peer-reviewed literature and such, what you see tiny effects. You don't see dramatic effects that consumers will see. And I'm not even sure consumers will notice really dramatic effects in skincare products anyway. And so it's kind of the experience that I've had, and that has sort of helps, that sort of has informed my opinion about a lot of ingredients, where they might have some good lab data or some good peer-reviewed research data, but if you really look at that, as a consumer, can they really tell the difference between that special peptide and just a moisturizer? I say most of them won't be able to.
Perry, I totally agree with you, because at my old job, actually me and Cassandra's old job, we used to do the same thing, especially when it comes to revisions and times and iterations. We would send a customer, for example, a shampoo, and they would test it and they would want to tweak it, but we knew that the shampoo was great. So we literally just took the same bulk and put it in like another type of packaging container, sent it to them, and they loved it. So I
You're
totally
sharing all the secrets.
right. I totally agree with that. But it's psychological. It's definitely psychological. You're changing the fragrance, you're changing a packaging container, and they think it's the best product.
It's the placebo effect. It
Right.
happens in all industries.
And I guess that leads to the question of like, how much can a cosmetic product really do? I know a lot of consumers are hoping to solve their fine lines because their cosmetic products are insinuating that they will have this feature. Will a cosmetic product actually be able to do that? And I mean, like, for any topical, even a prescription product, it's pretty challenging to get these actives to actually penetrate, even when formulated to be like a prescription. I guess that's my thoughts, that there's a limit to what a cosmetic product can do. What do you guys think? And maybe this might save some people some money if they're spending like hundreds of dollars on a skin cream because they feel like it's going to do something extra for them. I guess like I wouldn't, that's me as a consumer, but will it? Sorry, Perry.
No, I was just going to say that's sort of a feature of cosmetics, is that if you believe something's going to work, it often will work for you. Even if you can't measure it in the lab, if you feel like it's working, then it is working for you. And we can't discount that piece. don't get discouraged as a formulator if you're using technology and it should work, but you can't really show that it's a big difference. Consumers still, they need the story, they want the story, and the story helps them feel better about using the product and feel better that the product's working. Now, for some people, it's very funny. When we bought the brand Nexus, and Nexus, we're a VO5 Tresemme company made for hair care. Nexus was this salon brand. And when we bought them, we got all these samples in, and other people in the lab, they were just coveting these Nexus products because Nexus products cost like $30 a bottle. And they're, oh, these are great. And I'm like, you guys, your formulators, it's an SLES based shampoo. You know what the formula is. But that psychological piece made people feel like, oh, there's really something special there. And that really works. It really has an effect on consumers. So we can't discount that.
You make a very great point, Perry. Because I'm also thinking of how people use DIY skincare. People will defend that stuff to the death. They'll literally fight you. I saw somebody actually make a comment about how DIY skincare is like not that good for you, but people will literally fight you saying that it's worked for them, and there's really not much you can do about that. So even though there's like not a lot of, let's say, research behind DIY skincare, at least scientific research, people are still going to use what they think is going to work for them. But I also want to add, I agree with Jen, what you said earlier. I don't think topicals are really going to do that much. But some of them, they have promising evidence, but it's not going to have the same effect as Botox. If it did, I'd be going to the store like right now to buy me some drugstore skincare. But that's just really the reality. And when you put some ingredients in formulations, the bioavailability might change very easily. So we have to think about several things. And this also brings me to my next point, that let's say even if topicals could truly have the same efficacy as drug treatments, like OTC treatments, the testing has not been done to say that that proves so. So that's why marketing is also tricky when it comes to claims.
Well, I would like to get you guys' opinion because you're my peers. I feel like Olaplex changed the game in the hair care world as a cosmetologist. So I feel there is a big difference with using Olaplex system and not using it, or using other type of treatments, hair care treatments for color treated or chemically treated hair. What do you guys think?
I agree. I know Olaplex is really pretty popular. I'm pretty sure they're using like some special technology, and they have like several patents, if I'm not mistaken, that they're really like tight on. So I agree with what you're saying, Cassandra.
As the resident skeptic, I'm not going to really weigh in because I haven't like had tresses or hair and combed it and said and noticed differences. So I can't really say. Maybe it is. I know it does very well on the internet, especially on Reddit forums. But what I do want to say is that there is this notion that just because that something is patented, that means it's some sort of breakthrough. But getting patents doesn't really mean anything. It's easier to get a patent than you might think. And the science that you read in a patent is not peer-reviewed science. And so you can go, all you got to do is convince the patent examiner that what you're saying is real. You don't have to do a peer-reviewed study. So I'm always a little skeptical of the science that you read in a patent, because it hasn't been vetted much more than, say, a raw material supplier's study. Having said all that, Olaplex is very popular, and there are some people that really believe in it. I can't say.
Does anyone in our audience want to ask us any questions? We're going to be up here for another 5 or 10 minutes. So if you would like to ask a question, then raise your hand. So we're supposed to talk about a whole bunch of sketchy stuff in the cosmetics industry, and we really just talked about like I don't know, like 3 things. Is there any bugbear for you guys in the cosmetics industry that I missed?
I think for me, it's really just the claims. I really hate some of the claims that brands are making, and yeah, just like the clean movement, it just bothers me so much, and I just hate how every day there's just misinformation, and brands doing nothing to correct it. They just keep pushing this narrative, similar to suppliers. They're trying to make a sale, and I just wish that some brands will actually use scientific facts instead of fear mongering. That's just my frustration.
One of the things that I've found frustrating as a scientist in the cosmetic industry, one of the things you should realize if you're getting in or you're a formulator, it is really run by marketing people. And especially if you work at a big company, the marketing people are going to steer the direction of stuff. And you're going to work on projects that the marketing people want to. There's this idea that you get to be this formulator inventing things in the lab, unless you seek that out yourself and do that on your side time. Most of your projects are going to be what your marketing people want, and they usually want to say stuff that you can't say. And so it can be frustrating as a scientist and a formulator in the industry that you always tend to be like the no guy or the no person. And that's not a fun place to be. So you got to try to find a way to encourage marketers. Don't always be negative, but that can be a challenge. And the marketing people and the salespeople are making all the money too. So it's tough to be a chemist. Although, having said all of that, I loved being a cosmetic chemist. I like working in the lab because while you don't get all the money and you don't get to set the direction, typically the people in the building look at the R&D people as the smartest people there, and at least you got that going for you.
Anyone else want to chime in before I end this conversation? Alita, Cassandra, Cynthia, anything else you'd like to say?
No, I'll keep it for next time.
I agree with everyone. Just the whole clean beauty movement needs to, I don't know if it's ever going to get better, but let's hope someday, there's no more clean beauty movement and brands only rely on chemists for their information. That would be great. I don't know.
Yes, I agree. That would be wonderful.
Anybody have a question? Everyone's so quiet. Ask questions.
You could raise your hand right at the bottom of your screen. There's this little hand. You just have to click it, and then I'll be able to bring you to the screen.
But is there like a chat box? Isn't there a chat box?
There is. If you guys don't feel comfortable coming up on the stage, you can also ask a question in the webinar chat text channel, and I can see it there. But if you don't have questions, like, no pressure. But
Jen, maybe for a future one of these, we could do a little talk about how you can be a chemist on the internet and how to communicate this stuff and how to build your profile, because that is not something that they teach you in college.
Oh, that would be a good one. How about next week? Would you guys want to cover that next week?
Sure.
I see several people are now talking in the webinar chat text channel. I'll wait a couple minutes as people are frantically typing maybe a question. But you guys who are typing questions, you can also raise your hand. Okay, it wasn't a question, it was a comment. Okay, there are a few people typing. I don't know if there are going to be questions or comments. If you guys want to go to the webinar chat after yourself, if you see any questions that you'd like to respond to, by all means. But that wraps up this week's Cosmetic Chemist Dish. And then stay tuned. We'll be covering the topic that Perry proposed just there. Reminder, come back here tomorrow. It's going to start at 3 p.m. EST with a panel. And that's going to be happening in our Careers Night panel. That's going to be featuring, I just put a poster up in the webinar chat so you can see the poster there. And then after, where you see all the different, there's an SEC Next Gen Careers Night breakout room, or Avada, Crota, P&G, Clariant. You can go and ask these companies questions directly. They're going to have a stage just like this with 3 to 4 people from their companies representing different fields within the cosmetic space, from cosmetic chemistry or formulation development to clinical work to regulatory to marketing to even science communication and sustainable development. If any of this sounds of interest to you and you would like to work within the cosmetics industry, not limited to people who are in school right now, if you're like in a different career and wanting to like transition in the cosmetics industry, I think this event would be valuable for you guys. So please attend. It'll be great. And I will be probably putting out a reminder tomorrow at 2, but also maybe just like put it in your calendar and then come back here and then join the event. Thank you to our audience for joining in this week. We'll be back next week. And thank you to our audience. Oh, sorry, Esther.
Sorry. Let's do closing comments. Like,
okay, closing comments. what are your closing comments? Sorry. Esther, would you like to go?
Yes, I'd love to go. So I love using analogies. So in light of recent events, I just want to make a note that this industry is not just black and white. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and think of it as like an iceberg, in the ocean. The tip of the iceberg is the consumer just seeing the product finished. But when you look underneath, there's so many things that goes on. There's the regulations, there's the testing that's going on, there's mishaps going on, et cetera, et cetera. So you might see things one way, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of other things going on. And that's like why I want to name the title of this this talk today, calling it the double-edged sword of beauty, because it's not just like I said, black and white. So just keep that in mind.
Things are a whole lot more complex than you'd think. I second that. Valentina, thank you for raising your hand. Do you have a question or a comment that you'd like to ask or chime in?
Yes, thank you everyone for all your job. I mean, I have learned so much from you, and I would like to know, as a cosmetic chemist, what do you look in as suppliers to, in terms of sustainability, when you are choosing raw materials? Like, you ask them specific questions or approval certifications. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
This is something that I would love to cover in a future chat just like this, maybe with other people other than just cosmetic chemists, because this is such a large topic. Something that I personally really like to see, but unfortunately few ingredient suppliers have done this, is things like LCAs to actually substantiate some of their sustainability or environmental impact. Some companies have. What I find is a lot of the times people are trying to meet a certain certification and then that's that. Or they are making claims around origin of material, but origin of material doesn't actually tell you that much about the sustainability of the product. It's a lot more complicated than that. So LCAs are something that I like to see, and something that I would like to see more ingredient suppliers invest in, especially if they are making claims that their ingredient is more sustainable than another. A lot of the times people will say this just because they are quote unquote bio-based. I would like to actually see substantiation to show me that it actually has a reduced impact. That's something that I look for. Anyone else have suggestions?
I'll just add, I just want to give a reality about people starting in the industry and working for companies. The decisions about what raw material supplier you work with, they don't always fall to the cosmetic chemist. You're often at the mercy of your purchasing department and who they have contracts with and things like that. And so it might surprise you to find out that you don't always have an input or influence on which suppliers and what sustainability you're looking for. The whole topic, as Jen said, it's sort of a new and emerging topic, and there's a fair amount of BS. There's a lot of interesting science there, but I think you have to look for experts in specifically in sustainability, because when you're a formulator, you don't always know a lot about how the ingredients are made. You focus more on what does this ingredient do and how can I put it in my product.
Yeah, I'm working on a brand now, and the brand identity team, they want to use, ingredients that are sustainable, and we have to really think about what facet of that, because you have environmental, you have economic, you have social factors with sustainability, when you're getting raw materials from suppliers that are global. So that's really dependent on the client and what they have a heavy importance on when it comes to sustainability.
Do you guys want to answer one more question or sign off for tonight? Totally up to you guys. Or actually, how about the questions that are in the webinar chat? I feel like there have actually been answers from the other cosmetic chemists that are in the audience, but if our panelists want to go into the webinar chat and answer any questions after this this chat, then feel free. But maybe we could just finish with, just because it's already 8:37 my time, finish with concluding thoughts. So Esther already did hers. Cassandra, would you like to go next?
I don't really have any concluding thoughts. I would just say, if you're trying to put out a product and you take pride in what you do as a formulator or as a brand, do everyone like the due diligence and just put the right research together, put the right team together, marketing team, R&D team, make sure they work together on your project, and make sure that they understand the different departments, because that's another issue we had at the contract manufacturer. We always felt like they should work a day in our lab, and we should work a day with procurement or marketing, so that we totally understand how things are working with the company. So I would say, make sure your team is on the same page.
Definitely agree with those thoughts. Always be on the same page, be transparent, be honest about the values of your brand, what you stand for, your ethics, and all of that. And yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Definitely do your research. Research is key. It's a necessity. And it'll definitely help you with a lot of these claims that are out here. Peer review research, not Google research. Definitely look more into the peer reviews.
And I'll just say, one of the best things you can do as a formulator and you're making products is use the products a lot. Become an expert, or like a connoisseur of the product that you're using. Learn to identify what kind of differences you can see, that you can pick up yourself, and then that's the only way you could really get good at making formulas. And it's also the way that you're going to be able to tell whether you're using an ingredient and it actually has any effect in your formula, or if it's just an ingredient that's adding costs and it doesn't really do much that anybody could see. Don't rely necessarily on what research studies will show and things, and the numbers and statistical differences. What you want to do is have that experience, use the products, and see, can you tell a difference if you have the ingredient in there or not in there, and get good at that. And if you can get good at that, that's going to go a long way to make you a better formulator.
And so I guess that concludes our Cosmetic Chemist Dish. Reminder, I'll just say it one more time, come tomorrow for our careers night. It'll be great. Thank you to our audience for tuning in, and big thank you to our cosmetic chemists for coming here today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Have a good night.